and please be seated. So I don't know about you, but I've been following the gospel readings, and I find them very confusing because they've been very, they overlap, and they've been very repetitive the past few weeks. So I just decided to ignore them when I was trying to come up with a topic for a sermon. And I got to thinking about being part of this whole process of creating this new community and bringing it into being and birthing it, so to speak. And I recall having a conversation with someone who will remain unidentified. But we used to, for St. Luke's, we would distribute flyers in the community before Christmas and Easter services. So this was before Christmas, probably a week before, and we would just tag team distributing these flyers, and we would the system we had was instead of each of us taking one side of the street, we would do the same side of the street, but we would leapfrog. And we found that this leapfrogging method really lent itself well to having wonderful conversations, and usually initiated by the other person. And so this person was curious one day and had been obviously thinking about different things in church life and community life. And this individual said to me, well, why do you go to church? And that's a big question. And anytime anyone has ever asked me, I usually have an answer that goes something like, yeah. I don't know if you have the same experience. Other answers are very easy to come up with. Why do you go to the hospital? Well, to be healed. Why do you go to the doctor? To stay well. Why do you go to school? To learn. Why do you go to the grocery store? Get food. Why do you go to church? Crickets. Or if not crickets, there's usually a pause. And so we were thinking and talking, and this is a question that has bounced around in my brain for quite some time. And I said, you know, I'm still working on it. I think this is the work of a lifetime, truly. But the best answer that I can come up with is I go to church to learn to love. And I said that answer may change, but so far, being someone in my early 50s, that's what I've come up with, and that's what I'm working with at this time. So it was really exciting for me to read a book by Brian McLaren called The Spiritual Migration. And in it he talks about how we are in the midst of a great change in many mainline churches, in religion in general. And there seems to be a transition from correctness of belief or doctrine to being places where people are loved. And his dream is that churches and congregations and communities become schools of love. And I grasped onto that phrase. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm thinking the same way Brian McLaren is. There's hope for me yet. Wow. And the reason I mention this is that I see the start of it happening here, and I find that very exciting. And I know it might sound a little cheesy and a little sappy, a school of love. Well, you know, what's that? And I think I need to remind myself that learning to love is not about being nice. It's not about being tolerant. It's something much deeper and much more difficult than that. And so to help me, and I hope this helps you, I keep asking myself, what does love look like? What does love look like in different situations with different people? It's very easy for me to love Michelle because we think the same way. We have the same values. We have the same sick sense of humor. So it's very easy for me to love her. It's very difficult for me to love the person standing in front of me really annoying me. And I don't know if you're familiar with Nadia Bolz-Weber. George has mentioned her. Wonderful pastor. I encourage you to read some of her books. And I'm paraphrasing. I may not get the quote completely right because, I didn't write it down. But she said she feels that God is desperately wanting to be known. Desperately wanting to be known. But she finds that he's not wanting to be known so much in the sunset, this beautiful sunset he shows you every night, but he's wanting to be known in that really, really annoying person standing in front of you. That's where he wants to be known. And what does love look like? By exploring that question, I think we live it. George has been saying we make the path by walking it. And I think that connects with exploring the question of what does love look like? When we ask, what does love look like? When we have that annoying person in front of us, it influences our actions and we start to live it. And the more we do that, the easier it gets. And it cuts both ways. We talk about loving someone else, but I find the really hard part is allowing people to love me. There is a yielding to one another that happens, and if I'm in a place where I don't feel particularly lovable, I find it very difficult to believe that others would love me. And I think there's a lot of that in this world, that people don't feel lovable. And it's very, very difficult to be vulnerable and to allow others to love us, to believe that what they see really is the true you. It's like, oh, you look gorgeous today. They've got problems. They're not seeing me the way. Oh, I love the way you do this. You're very talented this way. These are all expressions of love. Eat your breakfast. Nancy drove me nuts. I have to tell, poor Nancy, she's not here, so I shouldn't say this. But a few years back, we worked in the kitchen together at Camp Gitchigumi, and every morning, I find it very hard to eat breakfast. Every morning, she'd give me a hard-boiled egg. Okay, that's fine. I can do one egg. And then she'd give me a second egg. Because she'd say, that's not enough protein. Eat your protein. And it was driving me absolutely crazy until I realized when she said, you need more protein, what she was really saying was, I love you. And when I realized that, it was much easier to eat that second egg. And there wasn't any blood on the floor in the kitchen, and it was great. So we yield to one another, and in yielding to one another, we gain what I love to call that skillfulness. It's a grace. It's something that can't be named. And one place where I've seen this work out beautifully, I've been on several retreats in monasteries and convents. And I'm amazed at the physical difference it makes when you love in that way. There's a softness. Some of the elderly nuns and monks have this softness in their faces that I don't see anywhere else. And I truly believe it's because it's been this rigorous life of learning to love. I think of the monasteries as kind of a hothouse. And that is where they focus. It's not that they turn their back on the rest of the world. Many of them are very active in what we would call the world outside the monastery. But the way they live together in community, the way they love one another, changes them physically. It changes them inside and out, and that is what I would hope we would get a taste of as we go forward with Gathering Table. And we are created for love. As cheesy as it may sound, God is love. We say that. We know that. We were created for love. That is our purpose. And everything we do grows out of that. It reminds me of a Bible verse that came up during this whole discernment process, one of my particular favorites. that you love mercy, you do justice, and you walk humbly with your God. And it occurs to me that these three things express the deepest, most authentic love that we can express. To love mercy is to love compassion, to meet people where they are. To do justice is to make sure that the world is a place where everyone is safe and has what they need. And to walk humbly is to be grounded. To be grounded and to be connected to the very being or force or whatever you want to call it, God, that created all of this wonderful thing, this wonderful place where we live. And so I invite you to imagine a school for love. And I invite you to be, the best word I can come up with is to be fools for love. Not to be foolish, but to be fools for love. To be optimistic. To be grounded, but to be fools for love. To be brave enough to love and be rejected. Because in that way, I think we really can change the world. And I was trying to think of a way to say this, and I came across a quote from Michael Curry, who is the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church in the USA. And I couldn't possibly say it any better, so I'm going to steal from him to close out my sermon. He says, "Stop and imagine for a minute. Think and imagine a world where love is the way. Imagine our homes and families when love is the way. Imagine our neighborhoods and communities where love is the way. Imagine governments and nations where love is the way. Imagine business and commerce when love is the way. When love is the way, unselfish, sacrificial, redemptive, when love is the way, then no child will go to bed hungry in this world ever again. When love is the way, we will let justice roll down like a mighty stream and righteousness like an ever-flowing brook. When love is the way, poverty will become history. When love is the way, we will lay our swords and shields down by the riverside to study war no more. When love is the way, there is plenty of room for all of God's children. When love is the way, we actually treat each other well, like we are actually family. And I would say that we are God's family. We are His and He is ours, and we are one another's. And so I ask you simply to imagine. In the name of the sacred, the incarnate, and the Spirit. Amen.